About a year and a half ago, I learnt how to do bonsai, which I found to be a really inspiring and relaxing and cool art form that I took home with me. I made my own second bonsai tree, or at least the start of one, in my own spare time about a month later, and I actually really enjoyed giving them both a little bit of a drink of water every day or two, which of course I wasn't there to do when I went for a trip to England for a month over Christmas, which was summer in Australia, and as a result, the two bonsai trees that I'd enjoyed for 2 or 3 months were dead by the time I got back. That was about 14, 15 months ago. And these sad, dead bonsai trees have sat in front of the studio next to the bin that whole time. And I've never had the heart to throw them out because once I loved them and then I killed them. And there's nothing I can do about it. Or is there? I got to thinking, especially since I've gotten back into tabletop and hobby gaming, most of the very pretty looking trees on miniature tabletops are actually branches and dead trees. And I have 2 very appealing dead trees. So I want to, in this video, see how much life and vibrance I can bring to maybe bring my bonsai projects back to life. And if there's anything I like, it's bringing things back to life with black magic. The sponsor of this video, which I'll get to later. But I mean, speaking of getting back into my tabletop and hobby games, Blackmagic have also sponsored Tabletop Time and resurrected Tabletop Time back from the dead by giving me everything I need production-wise to make that possible. They're just so supportive and so cool. So thanks Blackmagic for sponsoring this video and Tabletop Time. Anyways, this is the bonsai I made with Jeff. Very dead, but hopefully not for long. Let's begin with the first bonsai tree I ever made, and also the first one I ever killed. I shook out a lot of the loose dirt and dug a little bit out, and I mixed up a whole bunch of this amazing stuff that I was graciously sent from Luke over at Geek Gaming Scenics. It's a modeling compound which, when you mix with a little bit of water, sort of makes a bit of a light plaster-esque feeling thing that is workable for like 15-20 minutes, but dries pretty fast and also ends up drying pretty solid. And like I said, this stuff dries really fast. So after 15 minutes, it was actually ready to paint, and I went over the whole thing, sealing it with a base coat of putty primer. When the putty primer was dry, I base coated the whole thing in a really thick layer of black and then zenithalled the whole thing in a highlight of white. And in this video, you're going to see me use the airbrush a lot. I've started to use it more and more in my spare time, especially on tabletop time. I have a few airbrushes now, and I'm slowly getting used to them. I'm certainly not a master, but my God, are they useful. And as you can see, I can cover the whole branch area of the tree with the brown really quickly. Then I went through and dry brushed to highlight, and then the real rejuvenation began, moving on to the green with a dark green for the base of the leaves, and then moving on to the highlights of the leaves, one area at a time. And with all that green being layered down with the airbrush, as you can imagine, I actually covered up a bit of the wood, particularly on the branches closest to the leaves. So I just went back and dry brushed and touched back down on that base color of the brown, just so it didn't look too misty or like it's a plastic prop. Then I moved on to the pot. When that was down solid enough, I misted on a bright orange, but only gently, and slowly built up that layer, which made for a really good terracotta look. I actually looked at this after it was fully dried, like later on, and it's almost identical to the original terracotta color, just a bit more vibrant, which is really fun that that worked so well. It also worked well to slightly water down some gloss Mod Podge, which is sort of like a varnish sealant / surface coat thing. Popped it into the airbrush and gently built up some layers of an external gloss coat on the terracotta pot. And that just really sealed the deal as far as making this look like a terracotta material, even though it's just paint on top of the putty primer on top of the terracotta. Frankly, I reckon it looks better than the pot did before. Last but not least, we have the base, or the ground coverings around the tree. For this, I wanted to go more rocky because I also wanted to add moss. So I made a bit of a rocky slurry with a whole bunch of small sand-like pebbles mixed in with some matte Mod Podge, and then put my slurry into the base. When I was happy with the form of the basing, I went in with this really cool stuff. I don't know what it's called, but I found it at a hobby shop. It's like a grass moss carpet thing, and I'm not sure if it's meant for this sort of application, but I thought it would look like a cool moss. And honestly, it worked really well. With a few larger rocks scattered about and just a little bit of encouragement with a mix of PVA, water and a bit of dish soap just to tie it all in together and make it all sink and sit well, the end result was just something I absolutely love. You gotta admit, if I didn't show you the dead one, this would probably have fooled you. It catches me off guard. I am so happy with how this turned out. My goal was to just make it look like it did because I was really proud of what I made before I killed it. And it does, in fact, it's got more niceness going on around the base especially. I think there's a little less foliage because bits kept falling off, but with that said, I think as far as rescuing my bonsai goes, this was a huge success. Now when it comes to making results that I'm proud of, the other thing that always nails it is DaVinci Resolve. Now Blackmagic, who created DaVinci Resolve, have sponsored this video. DaVinci Resolve, their editing software, is completely free. I use it for all of my YouTube videos on all of my channels, and we've edited our best and most intense videos as well as our quickest, most get them out there and have some fun videos, which speaks volumes for what DaVinci Resolve is capable of. It serves huge professional studios and blockbuster movies, and it simplifies it with the cut page for people who are editing their first stream or vlog. And Blackmagic doesn't just make the editing software, they make a huge amount of hardware, and it's the most professional and affordable hardware you can possibly get, especially with their recent release of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K Pro, probably the most affordable 6K camera out there, especially with the huge amount of pro features it has. I'm filming this video on the Pocket Cinema 4K, and you'll probably have noticed these things hanging around on all my desks. These are Micro Studio 4Ks, and I love them because they can just mount on boom arms, and the whole video, aside from when I talk to camera, was filmed with those, and it's so empowering that I can just share the same Micro Four Thirds lenses on these super flexible cameras and the ones I'd film my pretty reveal shots and talk to camera shots on. So huge thank you to Blackmagic for sponsoring this video, and if you're even remotely interested in editing and videography and camera stuff, do yourself a favor and check out the website. Bonsai tree number 2. This is, I think, a cherry blossom? I don't know tree things, obviously. Forgot they need water. Now, obviously there are no leaves on this, and I want to see what I can do as far as adding foliage and adding some life to it, but I think this one is going to take a little bit more work and imagination to bring back to life because there is nothing but a stick. All right, same as before, but a little bit different. I cleared out a bunch of the base just like before, but this time I made a bit of a slurry for the base. Made out of a mix of tile grout and glue and some pebbles, mixing all that up and dumping it in. It's like this weird porridge, and I set it aside to dry. It worked really well. It was like a concrete base. Anyways, with that dry, I made a mix of that modeling compound, this time with a touch of PVA glue, thinking that it might help it just be a little more sticky so I could work vertically on the tree, and a touch more water and just slowly working up and filling in some of those gaps. This project was going to be a bit different to the other one because I have to create foliage. Now, I've never done this before. I do have this weird, like, spongy pretend plant stuff from hobby shops you've probably seen before, but I haven't used it to great effect, but I had the theory that if I add adhesive to it later, I could build it up with some flock and make it look like a bushy tree. So I went over all of the branches and slowly but surely, starting with super glue to adhere the root areas, some bulky chunks to the branches directly, I started to build it up with spray adhesive and little chunks of this weird spongy fake plant stuff. It seemed to work pretty well. I was really liking how it was coming along. And after I felt like I'd stuck enough spongy stuff to the tree, I started to try and layer in some extra flocking, spraying on that spray adhesive and grabbing this sort of chunky flocking stuff and just pushing it up against it or sprinkling it on top. And it stuck to it really well and did fill it out and got rid of a bit of that spongy look. The tree was looking a little bit tired. I think the spray adhesive might have discolored it a little bit. So I went over it all with a warm wash just to give it a bit more life, and then I moved on to the base so that the branches could properly set. I made another slightly different mix of a, I'm gonna call it a concretey, sandy mud slurry. Whole bunch of PVA, a bit of tile grout, some rocks, you get the idea. But I really wanted to try this stuff called static grass. Now I've used this before, but just sticking it to the base of a model. But the point of it is actually that you can use an applicator to make it stand up using static electricity. And I thought this could be really cool to try it on if I had a really nice lush looking carpet of grass around the base of the tree. So I used the last remaining bit of slurry on a little bit of cork, did a test of the static grass applicator. Wasn't super happy with it, but I felt like it was trying to work. I thought maybe it might have needed a little more liquid because the way it works seems to be channeling electricity through the liquid. My first application sort of worked, but I wasn't super happy with it and I felt like there's something I was missing. I watched a few videos, picked up a few little tips, and then gave another round a go because apparently you can layer this stuff. I used the spray adhesive, I switched to a longer kind of static grass, I had changed the battery in the machine, and instead of using that weird lumpy static applicator thing, apparently you can just hold the metal end of the prong near where you're applying the grass and it'll stand up. And this all worked way better. With the branches nice and settled now, I went back to try and add a little bit of green. They look a little bit sad and sorry. And I went around the whole of the tree, starting with the tops of the branches, shaking and sprinkling on a much more vibrant layer of green and much finer flock. And I did the same thing, but this time from the underside so it didn't look too scraggly from underneath, spraying underneath and slowly flicking and applying and stamping this finer, more luscious green flock underneath, creating a much more full look. I have these interesting coloured autumn fake trees around, which I thought would be really cool to add a sprinkle of colour. So far, it's just a lot of green and brown. So using the spray adhesive, I sort of stickied up the areas I wanted to apply it to, and just by like roughing them up over top, these golden yellow and orange little, almost little flecks of synthetic something just snowed down and rested and stuck to it. And I love it. I think it just adds that little touch of color and personality. Last but not least, the most satisfying bit, peeling off that tape and revealing the full finished tree. Here they are, both of my dead trees pretending to be alive. I am beyond happy with how this turned out. Now, obviously, this most recent one is less realistic, let's be honest. I didn't have a lot to work with when it came to foliage and the branches, but at the same time, it's really fun and it's colorful and lively and still adds that feeling of life and liveliness and green to the space I'm in. So I'm gonna enjoy having both of these things on the shelves. I'm really glad that they look like this and not like the dead twigs they have looked like sitting outside my office for the last year. As they say, is it namaste? Namus. Thanks for watching. Make sure to click like if you enjoyed this video. And of course, subscribe if you're new here. We have a lot of fun and I do a lot of different things with art and creativity like this. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.